Hello team, a preamble before my video where I give you the preamble anyway. This is a video that I actually recorded 2 days ago, but there's so much happened and I reacted to so many different things. You know, Gerasimov still being missing, and then we had all the stuff that happened yesterday with the cargo plane and debunking the Donetsk market and then the cargo plane claims from the Russians. I didn't release this, so you've heard the second half of this where I read out a really good comment from one of my viewers, one of you guys. I read that out and talk about American politics. You might have heard a lot of that before. So just to give you the warning, and of course, American politics is divisive and whatnot. But yeah, it is what it is. This was what I recorded 2 days ago. Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. A Ukraine War update extra video, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. A few things to cover with you today. We're going to start off with the strikes that we have seen recently on strategic targets within Russia, quite a long way back from Ukraine, back from the front line. Chris Owicki talks about this strike on Novotek at Ust-Luga, saying an audacious Ukrainian UAV attack on gas facilities near St. Petersburg was reportedly enabled by a chronic shortage of usable air defense systems in the area as a result of them being redeployed to protect Putin's luxury residence in Lake Valdai. Now, remember, I talked about a blanket that's too small for your bed. You put it one way to protect one area of your bed or keep one area warm, and it exposes other areas. So you put it back there and so on and so forth. The idea is that there's not enough air defense pieces of equipment to adequately protect Russia. I mean, Russia's a massive country, okay? So it's going to be the best will in the world, almost impossible to adequately protect all of Russia. So you've got to pick and choose where you're going to put those air defense systems. And when you're adding huge attrition to air defense pieces of equipment throughout a 2-year war, you're going to be needing to take a lot of those air defense pieces that were strategically positioned around Russia, and you're going to have to pull them to the front line, leaving gaps here, there, and everywhere. And that's also accentuated by this, well, this is true, by the idea that Putin has a luxury villa that he needs protecting. So Russian Telegram channel has reported that a Pantsir S-1 short-range air defense, a SHORAD, system or systems formerly based in the St. Petersburg areas were redeployed to protect particularly important facility in Valdai, i.e. Putin's residence there. So when you are starting to see Ukrainian capabilities improve, that they can produce these both missiles and drones that can go great distances, then Putin will himself be saying, right, okay, well, are they going to go for anything of mine personally? Yeah, we need these systems put in place around Moscow to protect, you know, key pieces of infrastructure and very prominent, I don't know, political targets that might be, you know, attacked by the Ukrainians. We need to put things around oil terminals. But hey, what about, you know, my luxury residences that, you know, I have a number of? What if they target those? And of course, then by pulling those pieces of equipment to there, you are denying something that has probably more strategic value, I don't know, military value than that residence. But of course, that would be a huge PR coup if the Ukrainians could hit a very expensive mansion of Putin's. I think I'd be, would that be a worthwhile target? I think it probably would be. It's reported that before the war in Ukraine, Russia had established a Pantsir regiment in St. Petersburg. However, apart from mostly being redeployed to Valdai, its Pantsirs have reportedly also been sent to Ukraine, and one was lost in an accident. And there's a reference to that here. Russia's standing up an air defense regiment with Pantsir SHORAD as part of the 6th VVS PVO army based near St. Petersburg. So those were, you know, as part of S-400 regiments as well. That was, St. Petersburg was an area that we know much closer to the beginning of the war. It was an area that the Russians were pulling, I think, S-400s away from to bring them into the war zone much more. So yeah, the Telegram channel also comments, quote, "Today it is simply impossible to take St. Petersburg and the Leningrad Oblast into a circumferential air defense network as well as important strategic enterprises due to a shortage of anti-aircraft missile systems." It notes that the local air defense units are mainly equipped with longer range systems such as the S-300, S-400 and Book M1, which have difficulty engaging small, slow targets traveling at low altitudes. So in the same way that the Shahed drones have caused a problem for the Ukrainian air defenses, and you don't want to waste these very expensive missiles on such a low value, technologically simplistic piece of kit. The Russians are having those issues, and also just they can't always detect those smaller drones. In response to the attack, Astra has reported that Russia has deployed S-300s to protect sites in the region around St. Petersburg. A video recorded by local residents shows an S-300 on the road. Quote, "So guys, we're preparing for the worst," he says. And that's that video I showed you about in St. Petersburg, about an S-300, doing a UE there, and the driver, noting that St. Petersburg has an S-300 being moved. So they are having these challenges, the Russians, as to where they're going to place their air defense systems in light of the probability that they aren't going to be building many of these, especially the higher end units, particularly quickly during times of huge sanction. Okay, moving on to a different subject. AI is the key to artificial intelligence to Ukraine's victory, says a new analysis in the Euromaidan press. So let's pop into that. AI is key to Ukraine's victory, says a new analysis. So the pace of AI development in Ukraine is more impressive than in the US and China, claims Benjamin Jensen, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies Future of Warfare Initiative. Quote, "Ukraine is doing it because they're building it from the bottom up, and it's anti-fragile. It's small, it's scalable, it works, and they know what to do. We're trying to do it very Pentagonese from the top down, which means we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars for a couple of high-profile failures versus spending," Jensen explained on to Fox News. I don't know if that quote is finished, but this is the idea that the Ukrainians, well, you've got to remember that Ukraine before the war was very much a technologically adept nation. There's a lot of IT literacy in Ukraine. There are a number of app developers set up there. They've got that expertise, and so when it comes to things like AI, they are going to be harnessing some knowledge within Ukraine to be able to assist them in developing tools that require AI, or tools that require a certain level of IT technology expertise. Sorry. US media explains to Americans that programmers and engineers are involved in AI applications in Ukraine. Many drones are made in kitchens, and then successful practices are launched into mass production rather than imposed by authorities. In the war, Ukraine leverages Western AI developments for diverse tasks. So AI is used for collecting evidence of war crimes and locating suspected war criminals, controlling drones and targeting, detecting Russian disinformation and propaganda, demining, and reconstruction planning. So there are so many applications. So, for example, a drone that can fly over a large area and map it for suspected mines, maybe seeing after a sunny day whether there's a difference in heat signatures from anything there, so the metal will be cooling at a different rate to the earth and will therefore stand out. All these kind of things. If you've got a drone that you can send up and it can artificially make its way around in a very organized, systematic way and cover huge amounts of area, or a number of drones working in unison, coming back down, landing, giving you that data of exactly where those mines are, then it saves teams of people. Obviously, you hope that it's as accurate as possible and they're not missing things, but that's going to be better than teams of 100 people combing through a field, taking painstaking care over a long period of time. AI can be used in that way. It can be used for target acquisition, as we're hearing, in terms of drones, FPV drones and whatnot, and facial development in trying to facial recognition. In trying to identify war criminals or things like that. In fact, we'll go on to talk about that in a wee while. So from General Mark Milley, a third of the armed forces will be robotized. He has said, he's told Voice of America, noting increased use of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. He believes AI will be pivotal in shaping future wars. I mean, we are getting close to Terminator type thinking, aren't we? And then a chap called, where is he? James Hess, professor at the American State University System School of Security and Global Studies, says to understand the battlefield environment is time consuming and it's complex. And that's, of course, why it's so important, because of the amount of data is overwhelming. So it's also data processing that the AI can help with. I talked this morning in one of my videos about how it's so important for nations to give equipment and assistance to Ukraine for their own capabilities in terms of improving their own processes, training, equipment, application of equipment, etc., etc. So when, and the example I use, when the US gives some old Bradleys to Ukraine, maybe a bit upgraded or whatever, and it said, right, how do these work on a battlefield? Because we've not really used Bradleys an awful lot in this and that context, and it was many decades ago since we last properly used them in war. So they'll be getting an awful lot of data back from the Ukrainians in terms of how that equipment was used, how successful it was, what needs to change, what the Ukrainians have done that the Americans can learn from. That's the same with every nation that's helped out Ukraine. It's about getting a whole load of data back about everything. Of course, AI is going to help with the quick and effective, efficient processing of that data. The Times has depicted Ukraine's shock at a US company Clearview AI's facial recognition skills. How with just one photo of a Russian soldier, it revealed his name, hometown, and social media profiles, even with grainy or partially obscured images. Clearview has become the Ukrainian government's secret weapon, told The Times. Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, Leonid Timchenko, told The Times. More than 1,500 officials across 18 Ukrainian government agencies are using the facial recognition tool, which has helped them identify more than 230,000 Russian soldiers and officials who have participated in the military invasion. Now, there are worries about this, and it does go on to talk about that. Is the government responsibly in Ukraine responsibly using facial recognition? Facial recognition is notoriously controversial for a whole number of reasons. Accuracy, skews towards certain ethnic profiles, so on and so forth. But I also note that this morning in my news video, the Ukrainians have identified an awful lot. How many was it? 9,000 Ukrainian policemen who had defected to Russia. And although they'll have that on file and so on and so forth, I wonder whether AI is used in that way. I mean, it is apparently being used to help collate evidence of war crimes, and the identification of people who are perpetuating those war crimes. When you're getting fairly grainy footage of a Russian soldier who's shot someone cycling on a bicycle, shot them in the back of the head, and okay, there's a war crime. What can we tell about that person? We can get AI to go and do its magic stuff with, he says, having, yesterday I was wearing a t-shirt that says, science is like magic, but real. It's not magic, it's just real damn good technology. These technologies can be super useful. In contrast, the article finishes, the Kremlin's control of Russian citizens has already been labeled a cyber gulag in American media. Quote, Russia under President Vladimir Putin has harnessed digital technology to track, censor and control the population, building what some call a cyber gulag, a dark reference to the labor camps that held political prisoners in Soviet times, wrote the AP. Moreover, to crack down on opponents, the Kremlin wields American-made technologies, Reuters concluded after analysing over 2,000 court cases. To sum up, Ukraine deserves access to advanced AI systems, which could be key to its wartime victory. However, Ukraine must restrict its use post-conflict to prevent mass surveillance or privacy violations that would mimic Russia's repressive cyber gulag, undermining the human rights and freedoms Ukraine stands for. So that is the caveat that needs to be applied to AI. AI is in its ascendancy and pretty much in its nascency, really. There have been many worries about AI, some of them very much justified, some of them possibly not. But people like Elon Musk, I know Rishi Sunak recently held an AI conference in the UK as Prime Minister. He's like set up this conference that Elon Musk came and spoke at, and there's a lot of high up officials across many domains talking about AI and the challenges going forward. There needs to be quite a lot of thought to go into that because there are many risks involved with AI, not least Terminator. Right, I'm just going to read out, and this is political, but it's coming from someone who probably sort of leans to the right, one of my viewers, just talking about the impasse in Congress and his point of view. Just take it for what it is. I think interesting observations being made here. So he says, not much new here. This is American Patriot, America's #1 Patriot or something like that. It changes it a little bit on my, I'll tell you who it is. This is who it is. It is, yeah, America's First Patriot. Changed it into sort of code name on YouTube Studio. Not much new here, but I did want to make a comment in hopes that you'll read it. Hey, I'm not only reading it, I'm reading it out. Prof. Gerdes released, so that's Professor Gerdes Explains, who is a Republican, a Christian Republican, very different end of the ideological spectrum to me, but he has a channel supporting Ukraine, and we've done collaborations. In fact, he's involved in the charity fundraising. Prof. Gerdes released a great video about 2 hours ago where he assessed varying US sentiments about Russia and Ukraine via quick polling. His results align perfectly with what I had long suspected and postulated, in that the American right's resistance to aid for Ukraine, their less aggressive views toward Russia, stem from the fact that the American right view Ukraine as a substitute for the American political left. Not only did you have the Hunter Biden scandal in Ukraine that tainted how they view the country, I would agree with that, as a globalist playground for money laundering, but the messaging from the left-leaning sources surrounding Ukraine was far too focused on American cultural politics, for example, Russia's assault on LGBTQ plus people. This is very interesting. I've just written an article, a fairly substantial article, on the southern border versus Ukraine aid for Only Sky, and I've dipped into three sources three different other outlets who have looked at how the GOP has aligned themselves more clearly with sort of Putin politics in terms of the culture wars stuff that's going on and has been going on for a decade now in Russia. And actually, if you look at many GOP voters who are big on what might be called traditional values, not too cool with progressive ideas, and whether it be LGBT stuff, whether it be abortion, whether it be this or that, like actually the decisions that Putin, or the legislation that is being enacted by the Kremlin, that is going down this hard line culture wars route, and actually they're using the Orthodox Russian Church to do a lot of the justification there. It's interesting that a former atheist state, the USSR, has got firmly into bed with the Russian Orthodox Church in order to harness that kind of traditional values together with an overt nationalism to create this authoritarian, ultra conservative, verging on fascistic state. But there are elements of that, and this is what your man here is saying, that many GOP voters like. And so therefore that would cause in them that cognitive dissonance where they like, yeah, I understand that Russia's invaded Ukraine, and on that very simplistic understanding, they're the bad guys. But look what Russia is doing back in Moscow with regard to this policy legislation. I agree with all that. And therefore, I'm not so cool about supporting Ukraine in this war. And I think that's it. I don't think we should underestimate the importance of that. Many of these people view the West as failing, and especially the US, because of these cultural issues: gays, trans, DEI, government intervention spending, etc. And so therefore they view support for Ukraine as support for overthrowing freedom, the US, and individual values. I think there's a lot in this. I'm not trying to, this is an observation, this isn't a criticism, but this is trying to understand why there is this impasse with the lawmakers and with many in the base in the US. why this maintains. The reason I think this is important to highlight is because it brings into focus the common cause of the West and how pro-Ukraine sources should adapt their messaging. The right and the left, especially in America, very much want to support and continue a system where the US is on top of a strong global order. And this is what I was trying to talk about in my video the other day about political psychology and political morality, and how the Americans view themselves and how international people view the US. And there's this like inherent contradiction in that we want so many Americans say, and this is the data supports, this isn't me like making stuff up. The data supports that many Americans go, right, we're interfering too much in the world. They need to sort out their own problems. And then many of those same Americans then also say, we should be the strongest military in the world and we should be a global superpower. And of course, you can't be a global superpower if you don't get involved in the rest of the world. And if you just say, right, you guys, if you go isolation, so you guys solve your own problems, we're just going to be over here. That's not how you become a global superpower. So you can't have both of those ideals being realized. There is a tension there. There is a contradiction there. And I think he really well speaks to this. The right wants a less, he says, go back a little bit. The reason I think it's important to highlight, say this again, is because it brings into focus the common cause of the West and how pro-Ukraine sources should adapt their messaging. The right and the left, especially in America, very much want to support and continue the system with the US on top of the strong global order. The difference lies in the nuance of how the order functions or looks. The right wants a less globalist and more focused order with an emphasis on protecting that order via cultural protectionism. So we want to conserve what we've got, and we protect that by projecting our power out to protect what we've got here. I think that's what he's saying. That's what I said the other day. While the left wants to maintain that order by leaning into more globalist views with less cultural protectionism than we have present today, and especially from majority or power groups, again, especially talking about especially focusing on the US here as an American. With your strong emphasis, so this is my strong emphasis as JP, and analysis of morals across your career, I thought you would find this very interesting. I do, and assuring, because it signifies a culture that is working out internal disputes after a 75-year period of rapid social changes, as opposed to a culture that is ungrounded by shared vision and morals. And this is very interesting. We can talk so much about the moral progression of society at large across the world in terms of changing. And I tried to talk about this in not like a critical way, but just observing the psychology, like the data, the theories of how we are pretty sure humans work and how they sit in different places on the political spectrum. This idea that the world has changed a lot, and conservatives, literally, as we know from the word, want to conserve traditions and conserve the purity and conserve things how they are. And when the world changes so quickly, they don't like that. And we know from heaps and heaps of psychological research that liberals are very much characterized by the term openness to new experiences. So in other words, if you're going to have moral progression throughout, and conservatives might call that regression, moral progression throughout time very quickly, where you are going into new territory and you're experiencing new things like sexual liberty and, cultural diversity in a way that was never around. It's like all this is happening so quickly. The reaction to that for people who are conservatives is like, no, we don't want that change. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm trying not to be a value judge this, but just that's what's going on. This is change. We don't like that change, and that change is not good for us. And if you change too quickly, then it's not a healthy change. We need to change slowly and take it bit by bit and be much more sure of our changes. And they would say, progressives are like, yeah, let's go on to new things. Yeah, that's cool. Oh, this change, this is different. This is cool. This is great. And they'd say that's just like Tigger in Winnie the Pooh. This is why I've mentioned previously that lambasting the less enthused about the moral necessity of supporting Ukraine is actually the exact opposite of what should be done to bring these people around to being less combative. I sort of agree with this. I actually think the way that you get people to change their minds is by showing how useful supporting Ukraine is to the US, not in terms of the moral argument, but in terms of military, strategic, economic importance of this to the US. No such thing as a free lunch. This is all for the benefit of the US. Those people immediately write off that position as being a projection of partisan politics, and even more importantly, an extension of the policies that they view as a destruction of their freedoms and way of life. This is really interesting stuff here. The strongest possible arguments, in my opinion, from daily interactions with these people living here in Ohio, lie in highlighting modern-day Russia as being the same as Soviet Russia, and that the invasion of Ukraine is nothing more than the long-standing goal of getting communism to spread to all people and to all nations. Now, this is very interesting. And I would broadly agree with this, which is one of the ways to access people who are naysaying is to like draw the parallels between communist authoritarian Soviet Union and what's looking like the other end of the spectrum, like fascistic authoritarian Russian Federation. But there are so many similarities there that I think that could be a useful way into persuading people. We must emphasize, he says, that Putin is the same communist that he has always been. I think it's similar. It's that kind of horseshoe theory. I think it's joined by authoritarianism. I don't think Putin is at all communist. I think he's entirely oligarchic. And this is like the top 2% in a kind of warped version of capitalism of the worst sort, like merging in with a totalitarian centralized governance. So yeah, it's just that. Yeah, that's where Putin is. But you know, you could sell that as communist. I guess he's saying he's the same communist he's always been, and that their tying of the Russian government to the Orthodox Church is what I said earlier, is a corruption and perversion of the Bible or God's word. Instead, these conspiracy theories about Russia being the great force of right in the world. I mean, that's interesting. So you could go down the. I was listening to an interview of, is it Tim Alberta or Tom Alberta? He's an evangelical Christian, and he's written this book on the evangelical support for Trump, and saying that it's just a complete bastardization, from what I can understand, of Christian evangelicalism, Protestant evangelicalism in the US. And he said, look, you're just like, it's not kind of true Christianity. It's not true evangelicalism. And this could be a way in to say, actually, their embracing of religion in Moscow is actually just not, it's a perversion and a corruption of the Bible. So I'm still appealing, rather than my approach is often, I'm an atheist philosopher, so I say this is what's wrong with their approach to that because of the whole religious context, or blasting the religion, rather than saying blasting that form of religion. And we should, if we are proper Christians, if you were a Christian, we should reject that on the basis of a theological perversion. Sadly, you will never convince many of these people. In fact, quite a large proportion view every dead Ukrainian as a dead Nazi. Nevertheless, if we can peel off 3 to 5% of this population into the support for Ukraine camp, as well as get another 3 to 5% to move away from their hardline views on the topic, then Ukraine goes from having 50% of the public supporting them to 60%, which constitutes a strong majority of any country, and especially the US. I mean, interesting point. You only need to get those few wavering at the side. I think we are beginning to see this realization that I'm speaking of take hold, because many in the ideological center or center left have come out vocally in the past week in support of giving the Republicans everything they want on the border so that the aid for Ukraine can finally move. I mean, there is an element of that. I don't know if that's been realized en masse, but there certainly are some people in the center and center left who are saying, actually, the border does need some reforms, and just give them that so we can get this pressing issue of aid to Ukraine sorted. The argument from those people has been that Ukraine is so significant that Democrats should be willing to sign off almost anything to keep the aid going, since they are the ones in control of the administration, combined with the notion that there is absolutely no debating that the border crisis is completely out of control and a vast national security risk. Interesting. I'm not sure how much it is happening, but that's certainly a valid position to take, I guess. This about face from the narrative of Republicans holding up the aid to Democrats holding up the aid, in addition to being dereliction of duty on the border, is the type of strong messaging needed to bring those doubters along, and I think that it is being coordinated by the intelligence community, knowing how important it is to shape public perception of the issue so as to keep the aid flowing. Right, something else I want to mention to this. So in UK politics, it used to be that you'd fight over the centre the whole time because we only had a two-party system, really. Lib Dems were like, yeah, whatever. So you had Labour and you had Conservatives. And the further left that Labour went, say Michael Foot back decades ago, you would lose the centre and the centre would go to the Conservatives and the Conservatives get elected. And then the further to the right the Conservatives would go, you'd lose the centre to Labour and then Labour would get in. And so everyone knows you fight over the centre. And that's certainly the case in two-party politics. And indeed, Tony Blair nicked Bill Clinton's use of focus groups in America, looked at what Bill Clinton did, which is go around America and say to all these focus swing voters and say, what do you want to vote for? And then instead of having a manifesto and dictating that to the electorate, in a sense, they went to the electorate and got the electorate to dictate the manifesto, which is like, you're the swing voters, you're going to get us in, because the people who are always going to vote Democrat, no matter what we do, like even if we slide to the right, they're still going to vote Democrat because the other option is going even further to the right for Republicans. And if the same for the Republicans, if they move towards the centre, they're not going to lose the people further to the right because they're never going to vote Republican. That's what happens in the two-party system. So you're always just fighting over the centre, and which is why it seems bizarre to me that the Republican Party is doubling down on going like crazy to the right. But I just don't think that's a winning. You just, in a two-party system, you ain't going to win. Now, what happened in the UK is we started fragmenting as we got towards Brexit. So we had the onset of UKIP as a party, who then sat broadly on most things to the right of the Tories, but were mainly about Brexit, and that interestingly nicked people from both parties because of Brexit for different reasons. And then we had Lib Dems getting, and then the Greens are coming along, and we're starting to fragment, and we've got localised parties like in the SNP in Scotland, and then Plaid Cymru in Wales. And so you couldn't guarantee in the UK, you can't now guarantee that if the Labour went more to the centre, that the people on the left would still vote for Labour because they're never going to vote for Tory. Actually, they're just going to vote for the Greens now. And likewise with the Conservatives, if they go further to the centre, they would previously not have worried at all because the people to the right of them who are always going to vote Tories, well, now they can go and vote for UKIP or Reform as it now is. And so they need to be really cognizant of where they try and sit on that political spectrum to try and get into power. Now, that's changed in the UK, but it hasn't changed in the States. So in the States, you have the narrowest form of democracy. As I keep saying, it's amazing that America's held up as a democratic ideal in the world. And it's got first past the post, which is the worst democratic system. And, you know, the UK has that as well. But it's just a two-party system. It's as narrow as you can get. And so there's no representation of most voters out there. They have to lump for one or the other. And it's more complex than that. You know, there are elements of democratic policy that I like, and there's elements of Republican policy that I like, but there's nothing that can reflect my political situation. And so I might register as an independent, but I have to vote this party or that party, and that's all the choices I have. And so, in the US, you just need to fight over the centre. Just fight for the centre, and you will get in. That says, you know, just be moderate and reasonable, and just say, look, we're not those mentalists over there. Now, what the Republicans used to do was exactly that. They'd fight. They were much better at campaigning because they campaign on emotion, Republicans generally. So they would scare voters into saying they're coming to nick your guns. If you're a Second Amendment 2A person and you love your guns, those Democrats are just going to come into your house and they steal their guns, and they're going to kill your babies because of abortion. And the Democrats would try and answer that with well, actually, no, this is our policy, and they weren't so good at fighting with emotion. Now that Roe v. Wade has been repealed, the Democrats can maybe try and do a bit of fighting with emotion and talking about things that happen and the regression and dress up like Handmaid's Tale and all this kind of stuff. There's a bit more play there, but essentially, you know, I'm massively digressing here. But I just don't think that there's enough political representation in the US. So I'm going to repeat this last sentence. So this about-face from the narrative of Republicans holding up the aid to Democrats holding up the aid, in addition to aid being in addition to being dereliction of duty on the border, is the type of strong messaging needed to bring those doubters along. So that's what I was going to say. So because, sorry, I'd lost my train of thought. So because in the US, you've only got two parties, the Democrats could afford to say, we are going hard on the border. And and I said this, I don't know, 5 months ago or something, or 3 months ago, something like that. Like, the Democrats, if they went hard on the border, now forget like the morality of the border thing at all, just imagine it as a thing, right? So if the Democrats went hard on the border, given that the Republicans have already got Roe v. Wade repealed and an abortion is kind of in their pocket type thing, then they would have nothing to campaign on because, and I said this about Biden, you could argue that he should go hard on the border, and then when it comes to the election, actually, what can the Republicans campaign on? Oh, the Democrats have done exactly what we asked, and Roe v. Wade has been repealed, and this is so they have to find something culture warsy. Now, what happened is that would really annoy. So that border thing would really annoy loads of those on the far left of the Democratic Party. But who else can they vote for? So you've got them in the bag, and therefore you would just get into power. And then once you've got that other 4 years of power, I know you've got 6 years senators, 2 years of whatever, but once you've got that power, you can maybe either go back on what you promised or change things up or whatever. But the idea is, if you've got a captured extreme for both of these parties who would never vote for the other side, and so you just need to do something that takes the middle or even takes a bite into the moderates of the other party, which is, we're going to go hard on the border, attract some of those moderate Republicans over to the centre, and then bish bash bosh. Anyway, it's going to be hard for those on the ideological left to stomach this acknowledgement of how those people feel, since they are used to claiming the moral high ground on every topic and using that as justification for their policies. But I agree with you when you say that what is going on in Ukraine is likely the most important thing of our lifetimes. Not acknowledging that those people feel like parts of the political left's ideology is more dangerous, that Russia's aggression not only creates a massive blind spot, but it undermines our democracies and cultures and weakens our ability to aid Ukraine. Many people have acknowledged the left's fears about Trump and how that is woven into the future of democracy. Now it's time to acknowledge how the other side feels as well. Glory to hero, Slava Ukraini. Really interesting. You may agree or not agree with any of that. You may completely disagree with what I've said and added on to that commentary. But I think we've got an interesting year ahead in the US going towards November 2024. And it'll be fascinating to see what Biden does in terms of campaigning. He's not got out, Trump campaigns the entire time, right? He's going to win that nomination to be the Republican candidate. And he will be mired in legal issues, but he's been campaigning. He's always out there. He has rallies the whole time, whether he's in power or not, right? And so, therefore, when you look at polling, you can be skewed by everyone's just seeing what's going on the whole time with Trump, and so you're thinking, okay, proximity bias and all this. Okay, I prefer Trump. But actually, when Biden's campaigning starts kicking in, when you start seeing adverts coming out, we were starting to see like the Lincoln Project put out some really stinging adverts on Trump and whatnot. You might see that needle shift, and so people are thinking it's a done deal for Trump in November 2024. I don't remotely think that's the case, and I think the Democrats have a good opportunity to do some interesting campaigning in terms of, the border, for example, but also in terms of maybe trying to scare women into mobilization and to voting. And if they can do that, women's rights, reproductive rights, then Trump will have a challenge, because when you look at what has empirically happened in the last since 2020, is that every vote where abortion has been part of that issue, the Democrats have won. Like, none of Trump's candidates have won in any of these kind of special elections or things that happened, or stuff to do with abortion, say in Kansas and other places. And you'd expect that to be a shoo-in for Republicans. Actually, it hasn't happened. And so therefore, when you take that form into the November presidential elections, there is no guarantee that Trump's got an easy ride to become president. And that, of course, might have huge implications for Ukraine. I'm not trying to get all partisan here about, you know, who should win the presidential election based on what I feel, but in terms of what I definitely will tell you is that Biden will be better for Ukraine than Trump. And I know not everyone thinks that, but I will definitely give you that claim. Right, I'm just going to finish off because that's been a lot of me just banging on. Right, I'm now going to finish off with this, just getting your idea on this. I have a consistency to my thumbnails, my videos, and someone has said, look, I can make this thumbnail. Of course, you know, I make an awful lot of thumbnails every day, so it needs to be very simple for me to do very quickly. Just change a picture, change the words. It's just me on my own here. Or no, JR and Grimsoft as well, helping with other elements, mapping and Discord. But, you know, what do you think of that? Is that a good looking thumbnail? That's Rajat Sharma there sending that to me. Let me know what you think. Anyway, thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it. Take care, everybody. And sorry to bang on about American politics again. I know for some people that's really divisive. I know some people are fed up with me maybe giving those opinions, but goodness me, it's one of the most important decisions in the world, if not the most important in terms of elections. And it has huge importance in terms of support for Ukraine. So there you go. Anyway, take care. Toodle pips.